Secretary Noem, let's talk about the law. Okay, so if your department then deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law, correct?
Joe Biden left us with...
I'm not asking about Joe Biden. I'm asking you a specific question. If your department deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law. Is that correct?
It was greatly violated when they allowed people to come and granted asylum applications.
Why are you filibustering? Why can't you answer the question?
Kristi Noem just got absolutely demolished in congressional hearing, and what happened is going to end her career. Congressman Dan Goldman from New York grilled Noem for nearly 10 minutes, and she couldn't answer a single question honestly. Couldn't explain why ICE is deporting people with legal asylum applications. Couldn't justify reinstating officer who assaulted woman on camera. Couldn't defend masked agents operating without identification. Goldman caught her in lie after lie. Exposed systematic law-breaking by DHS. Proved Noem is violating asylum law deliberately. And Noem just sat there fumbling, deflecting, refusing to answer, because she has no defense, no justification, no explanation that doesn't admit ICE is operating as rogue agency terrorizing communities and breaking law. This hearing was destruction, complete exposure, and video is going viral because everyone can see Noem has no answers when confronted with facts. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built National Brief Network to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. Alright, let's get into what actually happened because Goldman came prepared and Noem came with nothing but excuses. And you could see it from the very first question. Goldman asked the most basic, fundamental question about asylum law. Simple yes or no question that any Homeland Security Secretary should be able to answer in their sleep. Do you agree that asylum is lawful pathway to immigrate to this country? That's it. Yes or no. And watch how Noem immediately starts squirming. She can't just say yes even though everyone knows it's yes. She has to hedge, has to say there's an asylum program in place. Vague bureaucratic answer that doesn't commit to anything. Share this video with everyone you know because that tells you everything right there. She can't even admit the most basic fact about immigration law. Can't say asylum is legal. Because if she admits asylum is legal pathway, then she has to admit what ICE is doing to asylum seekers is illegal. So she dodges. She deflects. She tries to make it sound complicated when it's actually incredibly simple. Asylum exists. It's legal. End of story. But Goldman doesn't let her get away with that weak answer. He presses forward. Says, okay, so immigrants with ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country then. Correct. And again, Noem tries to dodge, tries to reframe the question, starts saying, excuse me, I'm sorry your question was. Like she didn't hear him, like she needs clarification. But Goldman heard perfectly and Noem heard perfectly. She's just stalling because she doesn't want to answer. And you have to understand what's happening here strategically. Goldman is building a logical trap. Each question leads to the next. If asylum is legal pathway, then people with asylum applications are here legally. If they're here legally, then deporting them is illegal. It's simple syllogism. A leads to B leads to C. And Noem sees where this is going. She knows Goldman is boxing her in, so she's trying desperately to avoid giving any straight answers. Think about what that means. But Goldman just keeps pressing. Doesn't let her stall. Says they are legally here because it's a lawful pathway, right? And Noem finally has to say yes. It's a lawful pathway. She can't avoid it anymore, can't keep dodging. She's admitted asylum is legal and people with applications are here legally. That's on the record now. Under oath. Can't take it back. Make sure you're subscribed to National Brief Network because then Goldman springs the trap. Says if your department deports anyone with ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law. Correct. And watch what Noem does. Instead of answering about her own department's actions, she immediately pivots to Joe Biden. Says Joe Biden left us with. That's not an answer. That's deflection. That's blaming previous administration instead of defending current actions. And this is classic authoritarian playbook. When caught breaking law, blame predecessor. Claim you inherited broken system. Act like you're just cleaning up someone else's mess. But Goldman isn't buying it. Shuts her down immediately. Says, I'm not asking about Joe Biden. I'm asking you specific question about your department, about your actions, about what's happening right now under your watch. But Noem won't answer. Tries again to deflect to Biden. Says it was greatly violated when they allowed. still talking about previous administration, still refusing to address current violations. And Goldman asks again, if your department deports anyone with ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law. Is that correct? Simple question. Requires simple answer, yes or no. And Noem gives third deflection. Says the asylum program was broken under the last. Still won't answer. Still blaming Biden. And at this point, Goldman calls her out directly. Says, why are you filibustering? Why can't you answer the question? It's simple question. And he's absolutely right. Any competent cabinet secretary should be able to answer whether deporting people with legal status is illegal. That's not complicated legal theory. That's basic law. But Noem can't answer because truth is devastating. Yes, deporting people with pending asylum cases is illegal. Yes, ICE is doing it anyway. Yes, she's overseeing systematic violation of asylum law. Saying any of that out loud would be admitting crimes. Would be confessing to running lawless agency. So she just keeps deflecting and hoping Goldman runs out of time. And you can see Goldman getting frustrated. Not angry frustrated, but strategically frustrated because he knows she's not going to answer, knows she's going to keep filibustering, so he reclaims his time, answers his own question, says obvious answer is yes. If you follow lawful pathway, asylum is lawful pathway. If you have open asylum case, you are here lawfully. He's stating established law that Noem won't admit. Then he pivots to the real issue. Says, but problem we are seeing around country is you are not following law. And this is crucial moment. Because Goldman isn't just asking about theory. He's talking about practice. About what's actually happening in communities across America. About systematic law breaking by federal agency. And he tells Noem directly, don't tell us to change the law. If you don't like asylum system, you change asylum law. Bring it to us. We'll work with you. That's huge concession, actually. Goldman is saying he's open to reforming asylum law, thinks it needs to be changed. But what you can't do is just ignore existing law. Can't decide as executive branch that you don't like law, so you won't follow it. That's not how democracy works. Congress makes laws. Executive enforces them. If you want different law, you go through legislative process. What you don't do is break law you disagree with. But that's exactly what Noem is doing. That's exactly what Trump administration is doing. They don't like asylum protections, so they're ignoring them. Deporting people who are here legally. Violating law they're supposed to enforce. And Noem can't defend it because there is no defense. So she just sits there looking uncomfortable while Goldman explains how government is supposed to work. Then Goldman drops evidence. And this is where hearing goes from bad to catastrophic for Noem. Because Goldman isn't just making allegations, he's presenting facts. Says unfortunately that is exactly what's happening. It's happening across street from my office right in New York City. Thousands of people who have come to court appearances have left with open asylum applications, have been arrested and then shipped off, and many deported. Think about what he's describing. People with legal asylum cases, showing up to court, doing exactly what they're supposed to do, following legal process, and ICE is waiting for them. Grabbing them when they leave courthouse, arresting them, deporting them even though they're here legally, even though they have right to have their cases heard. That's not enforcement, that's entrapment, that's violation of law. And this isn't happening in secret. It's happening across street from Congressman's office, in broad daylight, ICE staking out courthouses, waiting for asylum seekers, grabbing them when they come to required hearings. Think about chilling effect that has. If you know ICE is waiting at courthouse, do you go to your hearing? If you don't go to hearing, you miss your case. If you do go, you get arrested. Catch-22 designed to deny people their legal rights. Goldman gives specific example. Man with pending asylum case. At courthouse for appearance. Ripped away from wife and small children. Just grabbed. Separated from family. Deported. That's kidnapping. That's destroying family. That's traumatizing children. All to deport someone who was here legally. Someone who was following the rules. Someone who had right to stay until case was decided. Now here's where it gets even worse. Goldman shows video of what happened to that man's wife. And video is shocking even though we've seen so much shocking video from ICE operations. Shows woman who just had her husband taken from her, who's terrified and confused, who has small children who just watched their father dragged away. An ICE officer just shoves her. hard, assaults her on camera for no reason except she's there and he can. And Kristi's own department admitted this was wrong, issued statements saying officers' conduct was unacceptable and beneath the men and women of ICE. Said law enforcement are held to highest professional standards. Said officer was being relieved of current duties while they conducted full investigation. That sounds like accountability. That sounds like department taking assault seriously. But 3 days later, Noem reinstated that officer, put him back on duty. Officer who assaulted woman on camera. Officer whose conduct was supposedly unacceptable and beneath ICE standards. Back on streets after 3 days. And when Goldman sent letter asking what investigation was done and why officer was reinstated, Noem never responded. Just ignored congressional request for information. Obstructed oversight completely. So Goldman asks her directly in hearing, gives her opportunity to explain, says if officer's conduct was beneath the men and women of ICE, why did you reinstate him? And Noem's answer is pathetic, says investigation was completed, that she can give him that investigation and information. But Goldman sent letter 2 months ago, 2 months, and never got response. So he asks, why haven't you given it to me yet if investigation was completed? And watch Noem's response. She acts surprised. Says, I'm actually surprised you haven't gotten it. I'm going to ask my staff about that. Blaming staff for her own obstruction. Pretending she doesn't know why congressional letter wasn't answered. But she's Homeland Security Secretary. She's responsible for her department. If letters aren't being answered, that's her failure, her obstruction. Can't blame subordinates for systematic refusal to provide oversight. Goldman doesn't accept that excuse. Says you shouldn't be surprised because generally speaking, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of letters go unanswered. That's the pattern. Noem ignores Congress, refuses to provide information, blocks investigations, then acts shocked when called out. Says, oh, I didn't know, I'll ask my staff. But it's deliberate strategy, because if she provided information, it would prove ICE is breaking law, would document assaults, would show lack of accountability. Share this video because then Goldman moves to masked agents issue. And before he even finishes sentence, Noem interrupts, says all of our officers are identified. But Goldman shuts that down, says I'm not asking question, I'm making statement. Introduced No Secret Police Act to stop masked federal agents. Has 113 co-sponsors. That's significant bipartisan support. Both parties recognizing that anonymous federal law enforcement is problem, and Goldman explains why Noem is lying when she says all officers are identified. Says last month in New York City, NYPD officers were injured by masked plainclothed ICE officers. Residents saw these masked people pulling individuals out of vehicles and chasing them down street, called 911 because it looked like kidnapping. Because that's what it was. Masked men in plain clothes grabbing people from cars. NYPD responded to 911 call, found what appeared to be kidnapping in progress, tried to intervene, and ICE agents injured them. Your city police respond to what looks like crime and federal agents hurt them. That's not cooperation between law enforcement agencies. That's ICE operating as hostile force that attacks even local police who get in their way. And when Goldman asks what happened, how were NYPD officers injured, Noem has no answer. Chairman cuts off Goldman's time right as he asks, protects Noem from having to explain, because there is no explanation that doesn't make ICE look like rogue agency attacking local police, so they just end questioning. Leave it hanging. Hope people forget. But here's what mainstream media isn't telling you about why this hearing matters so much. This isn't just bad optics for Noem. This is evidence of systematic criminality. Deporting people with legal asylum status is violation of federal law. Obstruction of congressional oversight is constitutional violation. Operating secret police force is authoritarian tactic. Assaulting civilians and reinstating offending officers shows complete lack of accountability. All of this connects to broader pattern we've been documenting for months. ICE murdering Renee Good in Minneapolis, terror raids with Black Hawk helicopters in Chicago, detention facilities where people are treated like animals and Congress can't inspect, propaganda videos costing $200 million, contracts steered to Noem's friends. Every piece fits together. Noem is running DHS as personal enforcement army, breaking laws she doesn't like, terrorizing communities that resist, operating without oversight or accountability. Think about what that means. And Goldman's questioning exposed it perfectly. By starting with simple question about asylum law, he forced Noem to admit basic facts. Then he showed how those facts prove ICE is breaking law. Then he presented specific evidence of violations. Then he showed obstruction of oversight. Then he revealed secret police tactics. Built comprehensive case in 10 minutes that Noem couldn't refute. That's why she kept deflecting to Biden, why she filibustered, why she refused direct answers. Because direct answers would be confessions, would be admitting everything Goldman accused her of, so she just stonewalled and hoped it would end. But it's on record now, under oath, on video. Can't make it disappear. And you better believe this is going into impeachment articles. Robin Kelly already filed 3 articles against Noem. This hearing provides evidence for all 3. Obstruction of Congress proven by refusal to answer Goldman's letters. Violation of public trust proven by deporting people here legally and reinstating violent officers. Self-dealing proven by propaganda spending and secret police operations. Goldman just built prosecutor's case against Noem in public hearing. Republicans know it too. That's why Chairman cut off Goldman's time. Why they're trying to change subject. Why they're defending Noem with weak talking points about Biden. Because they know she's exposed. Know the evidence is devastating. Know they're defending the indefensible. But they're stuck. Can't abandon her without admitting Trump's immigration enforcement is lawless. So they protect her and hope voters don't pay attention. But voters are paying attention. Video of this hearing is going viral. Clips of Noem refusing to answer are being shared everywhere. People see cabinet secretary who can't defend her own actions, who deflects to previous administration, who obstructs oversight, who runs agency that breaks law and assaults people, and they're angry, they're demanding accountability, they're calling their representatives. That's why this matters beyond just one hearing, because it's exposing systematic corruption and lawlessness at highest levels of government, because it's showing American people that their government is operating outside law, because it's building pressure for impeachment and removal. Because it's making it impossible for Republicans to defend Noem without destroying their own credibility. Bottom line is this. Dan Goldman destroyed Kristi Noem in congressional hearing by asking simple questions she couldn't answer. Exposed that ICE is deporting people with legal asylum status. Proved Noem reinstated officer who assaulted woman after claiming his conduct was unacceptable. Showed ICE operates with masked agents who injure local police. Documented obstruction of congressional oversight, built case that Noem is running lawless agency that violates Constitution and federal law, and Noem had no defense, just deflections and lies and obstruction. This is evidence for impeachment. This is proof of crimes. This is end of Noem's career. She's done. Just doesn't know it yet. This story continues. Stay tuned.